When it comes to last week's gold, there were truly very few trades that took place. As I always mention, there are usually many more trades available, but I'm not always completely ready to send out all the charts. And generally speaking, when we look at the situation, gold is largely in a consolidation phase, and more or less everyone is just waiting to see what will happen next. I'm curious myself then whether we'll shoot more up or down. Last week, however, we only had one trade here, which by my standards is very, very little. Of course, I took more trades myself, but I always only send trades to the group that I'm most confident about and know I won't have to constantly update. So I mainly send zones that are simply fixed. Those are the good ones, and I simply send them there. Of course, I usually have many more trades than I actually send to Discord, but that's only because I really want to send only the very best setups to Discord, and setups that I won't have to constantly update and continuously send messages like, "This has changed now, that has changed now," because I absolutely completely don't have any extra time for that. But also we are in a consolidation phase, and because of that it's just kind of worthless, more or less miserable. So we had two zones here that I had sent out, or rather I had sent out more zones, but only a couple of them actually reached their target. So this one here was the first zone. I sent this first zone, but some reactions already started happening there, and this as well. I wanted to see a clear direct move into this zone, and from there for it to go up. But here it already started reacting from this break retest and this general zone, because there was also a zone here, and essentially there's a golden zone there too. Directly from that zone, it more or less worked. But then it came back to our zone, and it worked from our zone as well. So I skipped this zone. I wrote in chat that I'm just not taking it anymore. Ultimately, that specific zone just functioned perfectly, so there was a substantial profit of 230 pips. But sadly, that was naturally without my participation. And later on, we still had the very same FIB in the same zone, which was once again formed by 61 plus. It was essentially a larger zone, and mainly that was because I placed quite a significant emphasis on this particular level here, on this level and this level, and the FIB was right in between. So this could again be approached in two ways. Either you take this, but you risk it throwing you off here, or you simply take this, but you risk it completely missing you here, or you take the entire thing and cover everything, and you simply don't risk it missing you at all, and you'll just have a trade. But the stop loss will be worse, because you have to cover the entire zone. So, in the end, we had an absolute sniper trade here, which was around 530 pips. Yeah, so it was a really, really nice and very quick trade. So this is pretty much how the trade we had, the one we actually entered, would appear. If we take a closer look at what's generally happening with gold, as I previously mentioned, we are currently in this consolidation phase within this entire zone. It is anticipated that it could potentially break through this entire structure. We could say that we might anticipate a clear break, followed by a retest and then an upward movement. Yes, so it could quite easily reach this point. First, it will retrace, test this zone, and then it could go up more, either into this or into that zone. These two zones are still more or less here. Of course, shorting zones, which personally I find risky, so if you want them, you can take them. Whether I will take them, I'll see based on the reaction of the zones before that. Hey, this zone is also okay, but this zone is essentially here too. When we look at the short zones, we see here that we have the 71, nothing, nothing, nothing here. Here we have 61. Maybe you're asking why I'm using this FIB. The reason is that the FIB simply fits nicely on this level, and this level, so it looks like it works. But if we also take this FIB, I think this FIB also works well for every level, so I believe that in this case both these FIBs are correct, even though it broke our rule here that it shouldn't go beyond 61, and it did. But if you take this FIB, you'll still essentially find those FIBs there. You do have the 71 here, but the FIBs are present. FIB also applies here, so the levels are present, but they're not entirely clear. This could easily be a 78, you know. Of course, I'll focus more on the long positions. I'll set this up like this because I really want it to be a break. As for the longs, I naturally approached it in the primary way, and that is the 38 combined with this specific key level. Generally, when we take a closer look, we can clearly observe that it functions quite effectively here, here, and while here it's a little bit of a mess, we can definitely see that it works well here. So this is a nice level. Possibly it could hit the trend line and then shoot up from there. I pulled it up a bit higher because there's a nice level here, and also essentially an 88 into this small FIB, so we'll see. It's a slightly larger zone, but I think this zone has the potential to go further. Next we have 61, which is this 61 in this zone plus this level. We also essentially have our golden level from this entire range, so this is the overall zone, and here is, of course, also our golden level. What I generally think is that if it were to fall completely down here, it could easily work from these 50, because here, in my opinion, is also quite a nice level. What I often observe is that gold essentially operates within this kind of base where it seems to come test, because this is more or less a consolidation, and it tests this consolidation. And it can either test here or simply test somewhere deeper, or even completely at the very bottom, and then it shoots up. So it could easily not come all the way here. This is pretty much the last option, and I firmly believe it could easily happen there for a better sniper entry. But catching it here seems quite pointless or difficult, because you'd essentially have to cover this entire level, meaning you'd have to cover all of this, at least this, and at most this, and that's a lot. And these are essentially the only zones I'm currently watching on gold. I still think, however, that it could relatively move up, and of course I hope that it will make a pullback somewhere into these three zones and then shoot up. That would be the absolute ideal scenario. So here on the 5-minute chart, I have our golden zones. The first golden zone, I took it from this FIB because it's again the last possible option. If I had it here, it would be a bit higher. But I truly hope it will go a little lower, so I considered this as well, and therefore our zone moves a bit lower here. Currently on the 15-minute chart, we also have the 50 EMA there, so it might make a move. And then I also have here from this level, from this FIB 78.8. What I mainly like more here is that there's a retest of this. There's a retest again, and this base is here again. As I mentioned, this kind of base, right? We can see how it went up and down, and this worked for a short while, then it shot right out from there. So I'm calling this a base, and I believe that from this point it could relatively function well. Personally, I don't really like this particular zone. It seems far too risky to me. But this one seems more or less okay, and if this one breaks, then this one will be fine. So, a quick assessment of the zone we've currently taken. That zone more or less worked, but it worked very, very, very tightly. Exactly. For this reason, I didn't take this wick, this move, but only this one, because it's more or less a tiny difference, but it's simply some difference. And this difference, in my opinion, saved me from a stop loss because I simply chose a later entry and went for it, hoping it wouldn't miss me and that it would simply go deeper into zone. Nakoniec pozerám, że to fungowało z 5 minut i 200 EMA, czy dáva to zmysel. A pevne som veril, že to bude fungovať trochu skôr, nie až tak neskoro. No zachránilo ma teda tým pádom to, že som mal proste stop loss približne niekde túto zones. In the end, I see it worked from the 5-minute 200 EMA, which makes sense. I firmly believed it would work a bit sooner and not this late. What saved me then was that I simply had my stop loss approximately somewhere here. I sent it to Discord, so it was a very close call for me, but it turned out fine. And it was a very risky area, and I was fully aware of that, which is why I mainly opted for a slightly safer approach.